How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator?
Welcome to a better lifestyle. I am your host, Richard, and I will be with you throughout this journey. This show is here to empower individuals to do more in life professionally. You will find a variety of topics that will help you to be more productive and more successful. So join me and the professionals from different industries as we bring education and knowledge for more success.
Hi, everybody. My name is Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today's topic is mastering communications. And I have the pleasure to have Brenden from Master Talk. So if you do business presentations from time to time, or if you're in the corporate world and your boss tells you like to do a presentation from time to time, this show is going to be very helpful for you. I've watched some of his stuff, so he knows, Brenden knows what he's talking about. So it's going to be like one more tool to put in your toolbox to go higher in life and professionally. So Brenden, give us a brief resume of who you are, and we'll jump right into the topic.
For sure, Richard. Thanks for having me, man. It's great to be on. So yeah, my story started when I was in university. I went to business school, Concordia University, since you probably know it.
Yeah.
Right. So I studied at Concordia and I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing baseball and basketball, I did presentations competitively, and that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started to coach a lot of the students in my local university on how to communicate effectively too, so that they can win competitions. And it was through that experience that I started Master Talk, because I felt that a lot of the YouTube videos out there in the world weren't very good about communication on public speaking. So I started making videos in Montreal, and then a few years later, it turned into what it is today.
Okay. So we're gonna jump in right into the question. My first question is mastering communications. How important it is, whether it's in your professional life or personal life.
For sure, Richard. So what I always like to say is that communication is an accelerant of dreams, right? Regardless of what we want in life, whether it's for our life, for our finances, our relationships, our health, communication helps us achieve any of those goals a lot faster. That's why the question I ask is always the same, which is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? And the truth is that communication is not just about getting a promotion at work. It's not just about getting the next sale in our businesses. It's about every moment in our life. It's the way that we talk to our families. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we meet strangers when we travel. And when we realize that communication is about leading a more fulfilling life, then we take it more seriously. And that's why it goes down to these three things. What do we want? Who already has what we want? And what type of communicator is that person? And let's try and be that person.
Okay. You have a training. You do training on communication, I think. Yeah.
Yep, I do a free training every 3 weeks.
No, but I think you have a practice, like you coach executives and professionals. Yeah. What do you? How long have you been doing that, and what do you teach in these trainings?
Absolutely. So I've been coaching for 7 years, and what I've been doing for my executive clients and entrepreneurs is I teach them how to master 3 areas of communication. I turn them into bulletproof communicators, essentially. So the first one is presentation mastery. So for the first couple of weeks, we get rid of all their filler words. We have them smile more, vocal tone, variety, pacing. They get all that right. That's the first pillar, Richard. The second one is leadership mastery. What are the areas of communication that we don't think about as leaders? How do you give feedback to your teams? How do you answer questions on a podcast? You sound really confident. That's the second pillar. And then the third pillar is relationship building mastery. How do you use communication as a vehicle to influence other people, to build better relationships with other people so that you can get the results that nobody else in your industry is going to get? So that's what I teach my clients.
Okay. Can you give us, let's say someone is doing presentation, whether it's a business presentation or they're in the corporate world. Can you give us some tips on how to do a good presentation? And if you could specify to, since we had everything that happened with the pandemic and everything, like people were offline, like they were doing presentations in the office, but for a certain time, and probably now they're still doing there's still a lot of people are working from home. So can you divide, like let's say we'll go like the presentation offline, like in the office, if someone is doing a presentation in the office, and after that we'll jump online. If you
Yeah,
could
for sure.
if you could give us some tips on how to do that.
Yeah, for sure, Richard. So the principle is actually the same, and then we could talk about the differences between online and in person. So let's talk about the principle. The principle is what I teach called puzzle. Communication is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those toy puzzles we used to do as kids? Like jigsaws, like a box, 500 pieces, put it together. So the question is, when we work on a jigsaw puzzle, Richard, which pieces do we start with first? And the answer is the corner pieces, the edges. Why? Because they're easier to find in the box. So you pick them up, build the edges, and work your way into the middle. Simple. But in communication, we don't do that, Richard. We shove a bunch of content in our presentation. We get to the presentation, we ramble throughout the whole thing, and then our last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. And that's how 95% of presentations are given, pretty much. So instead, what I recommend is practicing your speech like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edges first. Do your introduction 50 times, not 2 times, not 3 times, not 5 times. Do it 50 times. 50 seems like a big number, Richard, but it actually isn't, because your introduction's like 90 seconds. So you'll be done in an hour. Same thing with the conclusion. What's a great movie with the terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. So same thing with the close, and then you work your way into the middle.
Okay. And you say that goes both if someone is doing a live presentation in the office and online, like everybody was using Zoom, and probably still there's a percentage still using Zoom. So it's the same thing, yeah, or
Absolutely. So, and just to draw an analogy with online, Richard, is that before the pandemic, the online world was optional. All right. It's like, okay, most of our meetings are still in person. We're going to have some Zoom calls, but we're still going to have a lot of in person meetings. But now it's hybrid. So now it's mandatory to get really good to present online. It's a necessary skill set in our Rolodex. So, what does it mean? Apply puzzle, do the same thing 50 times the intro, 50 times the close. But the difference lies in these 3 things. One is eye contact. So, when you're in person, right, you want to move your head towards the people that you're speaking to in the room. But when you're online, all you have to do is look in one place, which is the camera lens. That's it. You just do that, you'll be okay. Whether it's 1 or 10,000 people. So that's the number one thing. You can put a picture of your family next to the lens, picture your favorite food, something like that. Number 2, energy. At the end of the day, Richard, it's easier to bring more energy when you're in person. Because when you're online, you're like, oh, maybe I can wear my pajamas. Do I really need a shower today? Like, you don't take it as seriously. Whereas in person, there's a lot more expectation. So my advice is bring more energy in person and take more of that energy back into our Zoom calls. That would be number 2. And then number 3 is, once we're done all of that, accessibility becomes the third piece. So accessibility just means this. It's easier to access your audience when you're in person. So if you want their feedback, you just ask them. But online, it's really tough. You can't really get lunch with people. So I'd encourage you to get on phone calls with people in your audience to get to know them better and to tailor your message more effectively.
what do you see the biggest mistakes when people do presentations?
Biggest mistake, in my opinion, is lack of consistency. The best way to speak, Richard, is to speak. Right? So for example, puzzle, the problem isn't the strategy. The strategy is very easy. It's not rocket science. I'm not hiding anything. The real strategy is people don't do it. Like now that you know what puzzle is, are people actually going to apply puzzle? That's the real challenge, is how do you push someone to actually get the job done? That's why it's so important for me to go back to question one, which is how would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator? A lot of people think that question is cute, Richard. They go, oh yeah, it's a nice question. But the truth is that it's everything. Because if you don't have a burning desire to actually apply puzzle, you're not going to get better. And the people who do get better are the people who spend not like 10 hours on this, but 30, 45 minutes out of their life practicing just their intro and gaining the momentum they need to actually become successful. And that is the biggest mistake by far, is that people don't do it.
And what are some of several things that people could do to improve?
Yeah, so I call this my easy three. So for me, communication, Richard, is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. One ball is eye contact, one ball is smiling, one ball is facial expressions, body language, storytelling. It gets really confusing for people. So for me, it's all about what are the three easiest balls that we can juggle. So I call them my easy threes. So the first one is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like salt, pepper, eggs, breakfast, lights, and create random presentations out of thin air. And what I always tell people is if you could make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. And that's really what the random word exercise gives us, is it allows us to make sense out of anything. That's number one. And then the other two are question drills. Spend 5 minutes every day answering a question about your expertise, and you'll have answered 300 questions about your life. And the third one is send video messages to your clients and the people around you.
So now I want to touch if someone is an introvert, they have the fear of public speaking. How do they deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. So here's what I always say, because the introverts are actually the best people I've ever worked with in my career. So I think there's a misconception around introverts. So let me flip the script a little bit. I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why introverts are actually better speakers than extroverts. So the first one is that they're better listeners. Because I like to talk, and I love to talk, I don't listen a lot. That's why I make a great podcast guest, because I just talk. Whereas what introverts do very well is because they spend less time talking, they're spending more time listening to the person, what they're saying, what they're getting out of the conversation, and they're able to adapt much faster. Number 2, introverts are really good at pausing. Pausing is the most important technique in communication, and introverts do it super easily, right? So they're able to get the results that they're looking for. And that's what the second piece allows us to do, is that extroverts have a lot of trouble holding a space. Because when we're in a bar, we're at a party, we're at an event, and we look at an audience, we go, what's your favorite color? And we always want to fill up the space, whereas an introvert can just sit there in silence. So they do that really well in their presentations. And then number 3 is they're more accessible. Let's face it, I love Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a great speaker. He's an incredible personal brand, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for him. But because he's so extroverted, you either love the guy or you hate him. There's no in between with Gary V. Whereas with Brene Brown, you can't say I hate Brene Brown, because if you say that, the FBI is going to come after you and put you in jail, right? And that's the key. Nobody says that for a good reason, because introverted speakers are more accessible than everyone else.
I think you had a podcast. It was titled "Increasing Sales with Communication." How do you do that? How do you master that to increase more sales with having a good communication?
Absolutely, Richard. So lots of different ways you can go there. So let's do 2, 1-to-1 and 1-to-many. So let's start 1-to-1. At the end of the day, what are you doing in sales when you're a business owner? If I had to summarize it in one sentence, you're injecting belief into your prospects. That's what you're doing. You're injecting belief that what you have is actually going to serve them. So obviously, if you're a better communicator, you ask powerful questions, you get to know them. You're able to build the result and the belief that, wow, this person can really help me. Whereas imagine if I got on a sales call and I said, hi, I'm Brenden, I'm a communication coach. The guy's like, geez, like this person doesn't even know how to speak. How can this person help me? Whereas when you're a great speaker, it really helps you inject belief into your prospects and future clients. That's one piece. The other piece is one to many, right? If you're able to communicate effectively on a stage like a podcast, on an actual live stage, you can spend the same hour talking to 40 people instead of one person at a time, which means naturally, if you got really good at speaking, you get the right opportunities, you could make 10 times more money with 10 times less time because you're going to be able to make, there's some podcasts I've made $10,000 in an hour because 30,000 people might be listening to that episode, some of the bigger ones I've been on. And, maybe 5 of them will buy the product, 10 of them will buy the product. Right, that's pretty amazing versus like going to like all of these people individually. So yes, communication is directly related to sales in many ways.
What makes a good communicator?
So let's define communication. I would say communication for me is achieving a specific outcome for a specific audience. Whether that specific outcome is getting a job promotion, or whether that specific outcome is convincing your significant other that we need to get Mexican food today and not Chinese food. Right? So communication plays a role in all of those things. So what does being a good communicator mean to me? For me, it means that the outcome that you have for your audience is achieved. So regardless of your communication skills, if you get the result that you're looking for from the outcome that you're targeting, you'll get it. So there's some outcomes that you do really well, and other outcomes, like maybe getting more sales, maybe getting more confidence, speaking on a webinar, maybe need some more work. So that's the key. It always goes back to, are we achieving the results that we're actually looking for from our communication? And oftentimes we'll find that the answer is no, or sort of.
What advice would you have for people out there, whether you're a public speaker or anything related to presentation, like talking in front of people? What advice would you have?
Yeah, I would say the most important one, Richard, is to book 15 minutes in your calendar tomorrow to do it. A lot of people, when they listen to me on a podcast, they just go, wow, Richard brought in such a cool guest, and Richard's doing such a great job at asking all these questions, and Brendan's talking about the random word exercise and the question drills and writing these things down and sending video messages. So cool. And then the next day, they don't do anything about it. And the philosophy remains the same, Richard. The best way to speak is to speak, right? You actually got to talk. That's why you're a lot better, I'm assuming, than when you started. Because obviously at the beginning, you're like, shit, like, should I even make a podcast? Like, I had a lot of insecurities when I started my show. But then after you do a lot of interviews, you get a lot more comfortable with it. And then 100 interviews again, you get more comfortable with it. And I think that's the key, is to get started. Book 15 minutes in your calendar tomorrow. Do the random word exercise, do the question drills, and send those video messages, and you'll start to see the results that you're looking for.
What are you working now at the moment?
Yeah, for sure, man. So lots of things. I would say 2 things in particular. The first one is the YouTube channel, right? That I've spent probably the last 3.5 years building now. So that's probably going to be another 10 years for me as I keep building that and creating more free resources for people. And that's Master Talk. And then the second thing that I'm working on is a free training that I do every few weeks that people can visit rockstarcommunicator.com for. It's like a Zoom call that I do.
Okay. I like to ask this question from time to time to my guests. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would be the ultimate career choice?
Yeah, man. I would say if I wasn't allowed to be a coach, I would probably stayed at IBM. I'm one of those weird type of entrepreneurs who was never really looking to be a business owner. I loved being, an IBM employee. I really liked working there. The only reason I left was because I felt that with Master, I could make a bigger impact in the world. But if I can't do that, I'd probably just go back there or go work for somebody else.
Okay. Where can people find you on social media or online?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. It was great to be on. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Of course. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel, Just type Master Talk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way to keep in touch is through my free trainings. I do a free training over Zoom every 3 weeks. It's live, it's fun, it's interactive, and it's free, and it's facilitated by me. So if you want to attend, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Okay, thanks. Anything you want to add with everything that we've talked about?
Yeah, I would say spend 15 minutes, everyone who's listening to this, and reflect on the question we talked about many times today. How would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator? The people who got that question right, Richard, are the people who are spending 15 minutes after the show is over and really thinking about, well, how would my life change? Because once we find that reason, for all of us, it's different, Richard. For some people, it's to get better at podcasting. For others, to make more money. For others, it's to have a better relationship with their husband or wife or kids. When you figure out what that reason is, nothing will stop you from sending those video messages and doing the work that you need to do to get to the next level.
All right. Thanks, Brenden, for being on the podcast. I hope someone got value out of it. I know I got some good nuggets. So I hope everybody, well, at least one person, found some value in it. Thank you, Brenden, for being a guest on the podcast. It was a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you. For everybody out there, we'll have the information for Brenden's contact on the show notes at the end of the show. So my name is Richard. I was with Brenden from Master Talk, and this was Welcome to a Better Lifestyle. The topic was master communications, and we'll see you. Thank you for joining and listening, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye, everybody.